Thanks for joining us. I'm Marlon Bowling, your tour guide to the ag commodities, and happy Friday to you. We're so glad you could join us today as we analyze what to expect on our final trading day before a long weekend on the markets. Well, I want to bring on board Brian Hoops, president of Midwest Market Solutions, and he is based in Springfield, Missouri. And we'll talk about the setup for today's trade. For one thing here, Brian, I see where on the wire just a moment ago, we have new overnight export sales to talk about. A little bit unusual, just a little bit. So we had a sale of corn to Mexico. And again, we thank them for that business. It's good to see them as a regular buyer here lately. And this time we had a sale of soybean meal to Spain. And I was commenting to Brian here right before we came on the air live. You know, so far this year in 2022, if it wasn't for the Spanish-speaking countries, we'd be in a world of hurt when it comes to export sales here. We have corn 100,000 and 422 tons to Mexico. That soy meal was 100,000 tons to Spain. You know, you just haven't heard much otherwise from foreign buyers. For example, China, they have bought a couple of times, but that's about it. Small quantities. Is that getting to be more of a concern for the trade here?
Well, good morning, Marlon. As we go through the marketing year, it does become more concerning for the trade if China's out of the market because they buy so much product. They're way behind their buying from last year at this time. The faced agreement that they had made with President Trump has expired, and it doesn't show any indication that they're going to sign a new agreement anytime soon. So they may start to go back to buying patterns that they've had before, where they buy hand to mouth from the U.S. or they buy just when they're needed to without any firm commitments. So, in the long run, it may end up hurting U.S. export business. And unless we have a dire drought in South America, there's cheaper South American supplies for them to draw off of in January, February, and into March. And so that's usually our slow period of exports. And we are starting off the year very slow as far as any export business, particularly to China. So, yeah, it could be a long marketing year unless this drought intensifies in Argentina and in Brazil.
Well, last night on the Globex trade, kind of a weird event on the Globex market. Let's look at our wrap up here on the Globex market this morning. So we started out under pressure last night. In fact, let's see, I think corn was like a penny or two lower, and soybeans, when I looked on the early trading last night, they were down 11 cents. Well, right now you have the March corn 1 3/4 cents higher at 5.89 1/4 this morning. And you have the new crop December up a penny and a half at 5.59 1/4. So it held together relatively well, this soybean market. What a weird deal. Well, you can tell by that January contract where it was down 26 cents. Of course, that one is in delivery mode, so it's not showing much trade. The March contract bounced from 13.63 3/4 early last night to 13.79 on the close. Now it's almost on the high of the overnight trade when we wrapped up, and we're up 1 3/4 cents. From what I can hear through the grapevine here, Brian, this morning, it sounds like there's rain destined for the key growing areas in South America this weekend. Yet the market turned around and went higher. How did that work?
Yeah, what I think is happening here, we've been down for a good portion of this week outside of the day of the crop report. But we're digesting these rains. They've been in the forecast for over a week now, and we're starting to get closer to the actual event happening. It does look like those rains are going to happen, but we have a 3-day weekend coming up with no trade Sunday night and all day Monday. Trade resumes Monday evening. So we're putting in a little premium ahead of the 3-day weekend. Plus overnight, the IGC, which is the International Grains Council, their expectations or forecasts for world production, and they lowered corn and soybean production quite a lot based off of the drought in South America. And I think that news helped to pull soybeans off of its lows, and kind of combined with the fact that we're putting in that premium for the 3-day weekend. Now, they did increase world wheat production, mainly due to Argentina and Australia, the crops being a little bit larger than anticipated. So wheat's going to be the one, I think, that struggles as we go forward here until we get to the end of the season. Wheat become dormancy and then be subject to
and the wheat was lower overnight. It was in fact down 4 1/4 cents on that March contract at 742.5 per bushel. In the Kansas City market here, you had the wheat on the March actually down 8 1/4 at 751.5. Meanwhile, on the spring wheat, Minneapolis wheat, you had the March contract going down 10 1/4 at 885 1/4. It was another very weak session on the Globex trade on the wheat market in Minneapolis. Now, we'll come back in a moment and talk about the setup for our cattle and hog market activity as we head toward the weekend. We're talking with Brian Hoops. We'll be right back. We're back with Brian Hoops, and let's talk about this livestock trade here, Brian. On the cattle market yesterday, in the cash cattle trade for our livestock summary, it looks like we had just a little bit of activity. And of course, we're in the tail end of the week now, but the market really didn't budge from where we had been earlier in the week. A few sales in Texas at 136. That would be kind of, I guess, in the lower half of the trading range this week, but still similar to what we had had earlier. On the other hand, you had dress basis sales. These were reported, where were they? They were in Nebraska on a few hundred head that brought 218 yesterday. Well, 218 per hundredweight would be the same price they were the day before, so not too much market movement there. However, you look at the wholesale trade. Let's go to the beef cutouts and the pork cutouts. Whole different story there. And on the beef cutouts yesterday afternoon, USDA said choice went up $2.93. Selects were up $1.78. But check out the pork market yesterday. My word. Carcass values were up $10.82. Loins up over $12. Hams up $29. And bellies up $2.43. That was a spectacular move in the pork cutout trade yesterday.
Happens, Marlon, when you reduce your slaughter in your weekly kills, is you get a jump in the boxes in both beef and pork. There was a kill of over 400,000 head in the hog industry here recently, and that is going to give us, a big jump in these boxes like we saw. So it's not real healthy from the standpoint that you're backing up animals and putting weights on them, but it is helpful from the standpoint that the boxes move higher. So packer margins increase quite a bit. Hopefully they share some of that as we go into the end of the month. We're hearing, the market is going to struggle with captive supplies for the first 2 weeks of this month, and then supplies expect to get much tighter. We could see much higher prices by the end of January for cattle. So we'll see if that pans out. But the futures market is kind of consolidated for 2 days in a row now inside trading sessions, and that usually means a sign of consolidation. And then if we can break out one way or the other, it's a pretty good move forthcoming. So we'll see what happens here. But that's what we're hearing as far as the cash cattle market goes, and as well as some of the slaughter numbers that we're hearing on cattle and hogs both.
Yeah, live cattle were 40 higher yesterday. Feeders up $1, and lean hogs finished about $1 lower on the February. Well, thanks, Brian, for the help this morning. Appreciate it very much. Brian Hoops of